Inside prison walls, people say, the most dangerous man isn't the one who pulls the trigger, but the one who makes others pull it for him. In Texas, that's not just a rumor. Names like Spooks, Big Head, or Yeska are more than nicknames. They belong to men who once commanded entire gangs from behind bars. These are the 10 most dangerous gang leaders inside the Texas prison system. The men whose power forced federal agencies to change how they monitor inmates. Where are you watching this from? Leave a comment down below. Number 10. Jerry Spooks Idrogo, Texas Mexican Mafia. On a May evening in 2014, a police officer was shot and killed right outside a tattoo shop in San Antonio. In broad daylight, the shooting wasn't just a street crime, it was an order from within the Texas Mexican Mafia. The man who carried out the plan was Jerry Spooks Idrogo. Jerry Spooks Idrogo was a longtime member of the Texas Mexican Mafia, also known as La M, Texas. He held the rank of sergeant, responsible for collecting the 10% cut from local drug dealers in the area. In August 2013, a member named Billy Padilla was late on his payments. According to federal court records, Idrogo called Padilla out for a meeting, then opened fire, killing him. The incident was seen as a warning. The Texas Mexican Mafia does not overlook anyone. Less than a year later came the turn of Julian Piscina, a police officer in Balcones Heights who was also involved in drug trafficking. Piscina had continued paying his dime to the organization, but when his identity as an officer was exposed, the TMM saw him as a threat. The order to take care of it came down, and Idrogo was the one who arranged it. On May 4, 2014, Piscina was called to a familiar meeting point to deliver his dime. It was Notorious Inc., the tattoo shop he often visited. When Piscina pulled up, Idrogo was standing there as usual, but his two gunmen, Jesse Santibanez and Alfredo Cardona, were waiting in the back. As Piscina handed the money through his car window, they stepped forward and pulled the trigger. Piscina collapsed instantly. The death of a police officer prompted a full-scale federal operation against the Texas Mexican Mafia. After nearly 2 years, Idrogo was arrested and charged under the RICO Act, the federal law used against organized crime. He accepted responsibility for 2 homicides, Billy Padilla and Julian Piscina. In 2017, he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His 2 gunmen received heavy sentences as well, including life imprisonment. Jerry Idrogo was not a kingpin, but he was the one who kept the 10% law alive. He was the link between those inside and those on the streets, the man who used violence to protect the system. And in the Texas Mexican Mafia, men like Spooks are the reason no one dares to forget that law. Number 9. Manuel Mancha, Texas Syndicate. On the night of July 2, 2011, the west side of San Antonio shook with gunfire. A crew from the Texas Syndicate showed up to eliminate a former gang leader. But the storm of bullets hit the wrong house, killing an innocent woman. The man who led that crew was Manuel Mancha. The Texas Syndicate, or TS, is a prison-based gang long known in Texas. They control drug routes, collect protection money, and enforce their own laws through violence. In 2011, police and federal agents launched Operation Broken Horn to dismantle TS networks in San Antonio. Among those indicted was 26-year-old Manuel Mancha, described as one of the group's most loyal shooters. According to investigative records, in early July 2011, Mancha and several other TS members met at a bar. They wanted recognition within the organization by carrying out a hit, a killing meant to earn rank. Their target was Andrew Dirty Vidori, a former leader accused of betrayal. That night, Mancha's group drove to Andrew Vidori's home on the west side, but Vidori wasn't there. Inside the house were his sister-in-law Priscilla Vidori and his brother Henry. When the car stopped, Mancha gave the signal to open fire. They unleashed dozens of rounds into the home. Priscilla was killed, and Henry was severely injured. The San Antonio police, along with the FBI and DEA, immediately launched a manhunt for the group. The investigation lasted nearly 2 years and led to 18 Texas Syndicate members being indicted in a major federal case. Mancha was charged with conspiracy to commit murder to gain status within the gang, one of the most serious crimes under federal organized crime laws. At his federal trial in 2013, prosecutors described Mancha as the man who directed the shooters and gave the order to fire. Judge Fred Beery sentenced him to 37 years in federal prison, the harshest sentence among the group. Other members received terms ranging from 20 to 30 years. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Mancha's case became a textbook example of how the Texas Syndicate operated, using violence to keep its hierarchy intact. But this failed hit ended up collapsing their entire network. In San Antonio, people still call it the Wrong House shooting, the turning point that marked the beginning of the Texas Syndicate's downfall in the city. Number 8. Terry Ross Big Terry Blake, Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. Within the Texas prison system, the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, or ABT, is one of the most tightly organized gangs ever formed. One of the men who kept this network running for years was Terry Ross Blake, known as Big Terry. Blake joined ABT in the early 1990s when the group began expanding from prison into the streets, with his large frame and cold personality. He quickly rose through the ranks and was appointed as a general, a regional commander. His duties included collecting membership dues, overseeing drug trafficking inside the units, and making sure every member followed orders. According to federal records, Blake often organized internal meetings known as church. There he demanded payment of dues, reviewed internal violations, and decided on punishments. Anyone who failed to pay or broke the code could face harsh discipline. ABT operated like a military organization, with ranks such as general, captain, major, and soldier. Orders flowed strictly down the chain of command. Criminal activities included drug distribution, robbery, extortion, and violence used to control inmates. In 2012, the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a massive operation in Houston, indicting 34 high-ranking ABT members for organized crime. Among them was Terry Ross Blake, identified as one of the gang's 4 highest regional commanders. In June 2014, Blake appeared in federal court in Houston and entered a guilty plea. According to the indictment, he had directed meetings, collected dues, and approved violent actions for years. On November 13, 2014, Judge Sim Lake sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. At that same hearing, another ABT general, Larry Max Slick Bryan, received 25 years. The FBI described this prosecution as a strike against the ABT command structure. After the leaders were taken down, many of the gang's operational areas went silent. Drug routes were disrupted and several members began cooperating with authorities. In court records, prosecutors said Blake maintained order through fear. He rarely needed to appear in person. One meeting or one message from him was enough to make others act. Today, Terry Ross Blake is serving time in a federal facility. A man who once held command within a powerful organization is now just another inmate, and his case became a reminder that even the strongest prison gangs in Texas are not beyond the reach of the law. Number 7. Raymond Yeska Tellez, Texas Mexican Mafia. When San Antonio police dug beneath the floor of a house, they uncovered a safe buried deep in the ground. Inside were cocaine, marijuana, and more than $24,000 in cash. The man behind it was Raymond Indio Tellez, also known as Yeska, a general in the Texas Mexican Mafia, a man who could order someone's fate with just one meeting. From 2010 to 2013, Tellez sat on the Mesa, the outside leadership council of the Texas Mexican Mafia. He oversaw drug trafficking groups, collected the dime, the 10% cut every dealer owed to the organization, and played a role in deciding the fate of many. Under his command were several street sergeants responsible for weekly reports and payments. In the world of the TMM, anyone who withheld money or spoke to former members was labeled a traitor. According to investigators, Tellez's reign was tied to at least 4 brutal homicides. Jose Bravo, shot for collecting money on his own. Vincent Chacon, a new recruit who fired the first shot to earn his place while Tellez delivered the final round. Adam Sinner Trevino, killed over drug debts and alleged contact with the rival gang Orejones. Jose Joe Black Figueroa, executed during a gang junta meeting. Some of these acts Tellez carried out himself, others he approved as a member of the Mesa. On May 15, 2013, police raided his home in the Monticello court area. When asked about the safe buried beneath the floor, Tellez coldly replied, "What safe?" Moments later, officers dug it up, revealing nearly 800 grams of cocaine, 1 kilogram of marijuana, and $24,310 in cash. That search ended his control over San Antonio. While held at the GEO detention center later that year, in October, Tellez was attacked in the shower by 2 other TMM members. They had been ordered to erase the traitor. He survived, was transferred to another facility, and later won a $25,000 settlement for security negligence. In 2016, Tellez pled guilty to organized crime charges, admitting his role in the Mesa and agreeing to cooperate with federal investigators. By exposing the group's internal structure and helping solve dozens of unsolved cases, he avoided a life sentence and received 20 years in federal prison instead. But that cooperation came with a price. His name was placed on the organization's internal hit list. Prosecutors said thousands of TMM members had been notified to look for revenge. Today, Raymond Yeska Tellez is inmate number 39061-180, serving time in a federal facility. Once a general who could order deaths with a single meeting, he now lives in constant fear each time his cell door opens. And his story reminds us that sometimes a powerful empire doesn't fall to bullets. It falls when someone digs up a buried safe. Number 6. Larry Max Slick Bryan, Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. Before he could be released after more than 20 years behind bars, Larry Max Slick Bryan, one of the top commanders of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, was arrested again, this time inside the prison itself. Federal agents moved in and charged him under the RICO Act for organized crime, ending a criminal career that had spanned decades. The Aryan Brotherhood of Texas is considered the most violent white supremacist gang in the state's prison system. The organization operates with strict hierarchy. 5 generals form a council known as the Wheel, which commands hundreds of members both inside and outside the walls. Orders flow downward, from general to captain to major to sergeant, and finally to soldier. Disobedience is punished through violence. Bryan was one of those generals, overseeing the Houston and East Texas regions. According to federal records, he supervised drug trafficking, collected dues, and ordered punishment for members who broke the rules. Even while held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, Bryan stayed in contact with associates through contraband cell phones, using them to send directives and coordinate secret meetings. A homicide in 2008 became a key piece of evidence. A member of ABT had been kidnapped and killed for suspected betrayal. Investigators determined that Bryan approved the killing by phone from inside prison based on recorded calls and data recovered in court documents. After years of surveillance, in 2012, a federal grand jury in Houston indicted 34 senior members of the ABT, including Bryan and Big Terry Blake. They were accused of organized murder, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and arson. The FBI described it as a decapitation strike against the ABT leadership. In March 2014, Bryan pled guilty under the RICO Act. On November 13th of that same year, Judge Sim Lake sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. At the same hearing, Big Terry Blake received 15 years. In court, the defense argued that Bryan did not cooperate with the government and did not implicate anyone else, but that made no difference. Prosecutors said he was one of the men who sustained a system of organized violence inside prison for years. Today, Larry Max Slick Bryan is serving his sentence in the federal system. Once a general who commanded a network of crime through a phone hidden in his cell, he is now an ordinary inmate, proof that even those who control violence inside prison cannot escape the law. Number 5. William David Baby Huey Maynard, Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. In November 2012, federal officials held a press conference in Houston to announce indictments against 34 senior members of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. Among the names was William David Baby Huey Maynard, age 42, identified as one of the organization's 4 regional generals. Maynard was already in custody when he was charged. His record listed a long history of crimes: robbery, drug possession, conspiracy to commit murder, and numerous disciplinary violations while incarcerated. A detention order described him as a danger to the community, a flight risk, and mentally unstable. According to investigators, Maynard oversaw the East Texas region, running both inside and outside operations. From behind bars, he directed subordinates on the streets to carry out drug deals, kidnappings, extortion, and assaults against members who violated gang rules. The ABT was organized like a paramilitary force. At the top were 5 generals, followed by captains, majors, sergeants, and soldiers. Every command was known as a direct order, meaning it had to be carried out immediately. Refusal could result in elimination. Documents from the Department of Justice described ABT as an organized criminal enterprise, profiting from narcotics, robbery, arson, and intimidation. Gang meetings often ended with decisions about who would be dealt with next. Maynard either participated in or approved many of these violent acts, and the 2012 indictment detailed his involvement in conspiracy to commit murder, armed offenses, and large-scale drug operations. After more than a year of investigation, on November 20, 2013, Maynard appeared before Judge Sim Lake in federal court. He pled guilty to RICO charges and admitting his role in ABT's operations and its use of violence and narcotics to expand power. In December 2014, the court sentenced him to 262 months in federal prison. This case was part of the largest federal operation ever carried out against the AEBT, what the FBI called the most significant decapitation strike in the gang's violent history. After Maynard and other generals were arrested, the organization's command structure nearly collapsed. Operational regions lost fierce leadership, smaller cells dissolved, and many members turned to independent drug dealing instead. One investigator remarked, "When Maynard was taken away, the ABT's wheel of power finally stopped turning. Today, William David Baby Huey Maynard is serving time in the federal system. Once a man who sat at the top of the organization, he is now just another inmate inside the very system he helped build." His case stands as proof that even the most feared criminal networks can crumble from just a few arrests. Number 4. James Lamar Birdman Bird, Aryan Brotherhood of Texas, Sansom Park, Texas. A man was tied with zip ties and held at gunpoint inside a small house. The one giving the orders was James Lamar Birdman Bird, a commander of the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas who turned what he called an internal discipline into a case strong enough to put him behind bars for 50 years. Birdman was no newcomer. He had been a member of the ABT since the 1990s, his body covered in tattoos, 1488, ABT symbols, and a shaved head that marked his allegiance. In his world, fear was the only form of currency. According to court records, Bird held the rank of outside major for the Fort Worth area, responsible for the gang's operations outside prison, collecting dues, distributing narcotics, and enforcing discipline. The incident that brought him down began in 2012. The victim, Lovick Halden Steichleather III, was accused of showing disrespect toward the gang. He was kidnapped, stripped naked, and tied up inside a house in Sansom Park. Bird entered, assaulted the man, pointed a gun at his head, and asked coldly, "Do you want to live?" He then ordered the victim to pay $1,000 a month, a punishment meant to humiliate and serve as a warning to everyone else. The evidence went beyond testimony. Prosecutors had a recorded jail phone call between Bird and another ABT member in which he gave the order to punish to set an example. At the same time, cell tower data placed his phone in the Sansom Park area during the time of the abduction. When the trial began, these two pieces of evidence became the nails that sealed his fate. In August 2015, Bird was sentenced to 50 years in prison under Texas Penal Code 71.023, directing activities of a criminal street gang. It was one of the first cases to use the state-level kingpin statute to target gang leadership. In his 2017 appeal, Bird challenged the use of phone data and recorded calls, but the court rejected every claim and upheld his sentence. Prosecutors described him as a man who controlled violence through fear without ever laying a hand. The press called Bird the living image of the Aryan Brotherhood. A shaved head, a Hitler tattoo across his back, the 14 words carved along his ribs, and 3 ABT symbols on his chest. Even while held in solitary confinement 23 hours a day at Hugh's unit, he remained a symbol of ABT's most brutal era. On January 26, 2025, James Birdman Bird was found deceased in his cell at the age of 56. Officials said there were no signs of foul play, and the cause of death awaits a medical report. With his death, Bird's record is closed. But the story of how one man used fear to control an entire small town in Texas remains a warning to anyone who believes that prison power lasts forever. Number 3. Raul Alto Ramos, Texas Mexican Mafia. San Antonio, Texas, a wooden door bursts open in the early morning. 3 masked men rush in, shove the victim to the ground, grab his wallet, take the television, and leave one message behind. "Next time, pay your dime." Those door kick jobs were the signature of Raul Alto Ramos, once the free world general of the Texas Mexican Mafia, now serving life in federal prison. The Texas Mexican Mafia, once known as La M de Texas, began in the prison system before expanding to the streets. When Ramos rose to power in 2015, he brought back the classic mafia tax model for the modern age. Every drug dealer in the San Antonio area had to pay a dime, 10% of profits, to the organization. Those who didn't could expect a boot through their door. According to DEA records, Ramos oversaw 4 quadrants across the city. Each week, he ordered his men to add at least 2 new tienditas, street drug spots, to the payment list. Local crews had to report earnings in notebooks, listing every dollar. One of those books, seized during a raid, showed a total of $862,000, with Ramos receiving the largest cut from outside prison. But it wasn't only about money. When a high-ranking inmate, Benito Viejito Alonso, ordered a hit on a family member accused of betrayal, Ramos relayed the command to the streets. 2 shooters opened fire on Teresa Alonso, a relative of the gang leader. She survived, but her testimony became the spark that brought down the entire organization. On May 19, 2017, the OCDETF task force launched the largest operation in San Antonio's history. 37 people were indicted. In the indictment, Raul Alto Ramos was named as the outside general in command. A year later, on May 2, 2018, Ramos pled guilty to conspiracy to commit extortion, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, over 50 grams of methamphetamine and 100 grams of heroin, and possession of a firearm by a felon. On October 8, 2019, Judge Xavier Rodriguez sentenced him to life in federal prison and ordered the forfeiture of $275,500 in illegal proceeds. Ramos appealed, but in 2021 the court rejected it, confirming that he had pled guilty voluntarily and acknowledged his leadership role, along with possession of at least 1 kilogram of heroin. Today, Raul Alto Ramos, once commanding hundreds of street dealers across the city, now lives behind the same walls where he has no one left to order around. Number 2. William Glenn Big Head Chun, Aryan Circle. At the Yazoo City Prison in Mississippi, an inmate was repeatedly attacked with a sharp weapon during a work shift. The assault lasted only seconds, but it was enough to put the entire facility on lockdown. The man who gave the order was William Glenn Big Head Chun, one of 5 leaders accused of running the white supremacist organization known as the Aryan Circle. The group began inside the Texas prison system during the 1980s, but under Chun's command, it evolved into a criminal network that spread across multiple states. It operated like a military force. Leaders gave orders, subordinates carried them out, and no one asked questions. Disobeying commands, or even being suspected of disloyalty, often meant paying in blood. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, Chun held a national leadership role. He controlled prison-based factions, ordered violent acts to maintain discipline, and ruled through fear. The Yazoo City attack in 2017 was one example. Chun ordered a new recruit, Aaron Mongo Renfro, to attack another inmate as part of his initiation. The act was described as a blood-in, a violent test of loyalty before becoming a full member. Investigators described Chun's chain of command as a web of handwritten letters coded with symbols. Each message passed from one cell to another until it reached the person tasked with execution. Every order bore his indirect signature. In 2020, the largest law enforcement operation ever targeting the Aryan Circle was launched. More than 20 members were arrested across Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. Among them was William Glenn Chun, identified as the leader responsible for ordering murders, assaults, and organized criminal activities. In November 2021, a federal jury in Beaumont, Texas found Chun guilty of RICO conspiracy, the charge used for leaders of organized crime groups. In December 2022, he was sentenced to life in federal prison. At the same time, he faced separate charges for the Yazoo City attack, and in January 2023, he received an additional 10 years for ordering that assault behind bars. Prosecutors described him as a man who maintained power through fear. When the case closed, the judge stated, "Every order he gave was an act of violence, and society must be protected from that." Today, William Glenn Big Head Chun is serving a life sentence in the federal prison system. He once controlled a vast network through coded letters and handwritten commands. Now, those letters go nowhere, and Big Head is left alone within 4 walls, where every order he gives stops at the cell door. Number 1. Eduardo Tablas Ravelo, Barrio Azteca. The war between the Juárez Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel claimed thousands of lives. But few knew that between those two forces existed a smaller group, Barrio Azteca. And the man commanding them from the shadows was Eduardo Tablas Ravelo, nicknamed Wooden Board, a man who measured the value of life in dollars. Barrio Azteca began as a prison gang for Mexican-American inmates, but when Ravelo rose to power, he turned it into an armed extension of the Juárez Cartel in the billion-dollar plaza wars for drug routes. In Juárez, he was known as El Tablas, a name that could silence entire neighborhoods after sunset. Ravelo structured Barrio Azteca like a violent corporation. In every district, he placed a quota collector, someone responsible for taking 10% of profits from every dealer. Those who didn't pay were branded as traitors. He also commanded a personal strike unit known as La Estructura, men tasked with collecting debts through weapons, abductions, and punishment. A resolve order could be written on a scrap of paper, passed through couriers, and by morning the person named would vanish. Between 2008 and 2011, Juárez was considered the most dangerous city in the world. Police discovered dozens of bodies each week, many tied to Barrio Azteca's quota system. Among the most shocking cases was the murder of 3 individuals linked to the U.S. consulate in 2010, an event that prompted an international manhunt. Ravelo's name soon appeared on the FBI's most wanted list, with warnings that he may have undergone facial surgery. But Ravelo's reach wasn't limited to violence. He was also a skilled money launderer, using women as account holders, transferring funds through shell companies, and sending money back to El Paso disguised as legitimate goods. Each month, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowed from Juárez into the United States, fueling the ongoing war. Inside prison, his people still collected protection fees, while outside, armored pickup trucks patrolled neighborhoods like the cartel's private police. In 2018, Ravelo was captured in Uruapan, Michoacán. When officers handcuffed him, he didn't speak. He simply smiled, with a cold look that seemed to say he was used to endings written in violence. 7 years later, in 2025, he was extradited to El Paso. A federal law enforcement official described it as a significant arrest tied to border violence, and today, Ravelo sits in a cell, but the streets he once ruled still bear traces of fear. Families who lost loved ones rarely say his name aloud. In Juárez, whenever someone goes missing, people still whisper, "Could it be one of Tablas' old orders?" He once used the name wooden board as a symbol of cold calculation, and in the end, he too became nothing more than a number in an FBI file.